stop writing emails like you're writing a novel. Get to the point, respect people's time, say what you mean. Because, Paul Graham, I think, said, the more words you use, the less people listen. Welcome back, everybody, to Catch the Zenith, the podcast where I talk about business and high performance. My name is Nicola. I'm currently working in software sales. And today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections, which is a format where I try to reflect upon my week, talk about stuff I've done well, things I can do better. I talk about ideas that are on my mind. I try to articulate things. It's my attempt here to articulate things that are in my mind and not yet perhaps capable of articulating them. So I'm sharing that with you guys. And the overall idea of this format is to not make mistakes twice. This is one of the, I would say, core themes of this series. And today I want to discuss four main things. And the first one is a lesson I learned in sales over the course of the past 6-ish weeks, because I recently started to work in a new company, in a new job, basically, a B2B software startup. And I have there a boss, obviously, and I want to share here a quick story. So I started in this new job in sales, and what I'm doing there is I'm booking demos or booking meetings with prospects, with potential clients. And that's my main task. But my goal is to, as quickly as possible, move up the ladder and become account executive. Right now I'm a SDR, a sales development representative, which is a fancy word for someone who books meetings. But the next step is to become an account executive and basically go through the entire sales process. So from cold calling to doing demos to pull the trigger and actually closing the deal, you do everything. And I already have right now the privilege to attend some of those demos, and I'm given also the responsibility to send emails after the demos with next steps and the summary of the meeting. And at one point, I sent an email. I'm actually right now not sure if it was post a demo. I think it was after a cold call. So when doing cold outreaches to book a demo, and this one prospect wanted to get more information via email, and I sent a pretty extensive email, which was not that well structured in the first place. And my mentor / boss then gave me a very valuable lesson, which was make it easy for your prospect to buy from you. If it's too complicated, if you are making the entire process of buying from you, starting with email communication, how you speak, how the meetings are set up, etc. If you make that difficult, it's harder for the prospect to buy. But if you make it very simple, using concise words, not making it difficult for the prospect, so removing all the effort, all the things the prospect doesn't like, the experience is way more enjoyable. And Mark Cuban, maybe you've heard of him. I think he was in Shark Tank, not entirely sure. He has this quote saying, make your product easier to buy than your competition, or you will find your customers buying from them, not you. And also thinking about that in general in terms of entrepreneurship, I think Hormozi talked about this in his book, $100 Million Offers, about this continuum that when starting a new company, you want to make it hard for yourself to deliver the service or product, but easy for the prospect, and then you can charge more. So in the beginning, you are doing everything for them. In my case, back in the days when I had a coaching business, I had more or less done with you service. But within that done with you service, I did a lot of stuff for them. I created for them, for instance, weekly plans, weekly schedules, so they don't need to do that. It was more or less a productivity coaching program for people with ADHD. And I wanted to make it as easy as possible for them so they really enjoy the experience. They get a lot of value. And interestingly, so you start with in entrepreneurship with, okay, it's your product, your service is hard to deliver. So you're doing a lot of extra effort putting in it. But it's easy for the prospect to receive the service. But of course, maybe it's a little bit more expensive because you put in some more effort. And the more clients you have and the more you grow as a company, as I understood from Hormozy, you can dial a little bit back. So you could say, okay, I do a little bit less, I over-deliver a little bit less, and I charge a little bit less. And this is, I think, the normal game of scaling a company. Just found that interesting. All this to say that you like writing short emails and in general making it for the prospect easy to buy from you will increase the likelihood that you will bring the deal to a close. Now, building up on what I just said, I think concise email communication is a crucial part of this. Let me quickly explain. So I'm sending quite a bunch of emails every day in my new job, or sometimes sending some emails. And the main point here is to substitute long, unstructured emails with short, concise text that use bullet points and linked words. So this means you have, for instance, 3 bullets summarizing a meeting or summarizing your product, in our case. And then maybe you have a website, maybe you have a presentation, maybe you have a way to showcase your product. You link a word as opposed to putting in the entire link. Quite an obvious one, but still some people don't do that. And moreover, to cut to the chase by avoiding, and that's a very important point I want to hit home, to avoid using filler sentences like, I hope you're doing well, how are you, how's your day going, or I hope this email fits you well. I've read so many emails where the first sentence is something like that. And to be frank, I did that also many times. In some settings, I'm still doing that. Depends a little bit. But in most cases, if you know the person or people expect from you a concise communication, it's just an annoyance. Because if you start the email with, hey, John, how's your day going? Actually, or in most cases, I don't care about how my prospects or the other person's day is going if I'm communicating over email. It's just a waste of time. Get to the point. Hi, John. The main point here is that you get straight to the point. Or, for instance, hi, John. We had a meeting last week. I remember you wanted to discuss XYZ with your boss. What's the feedback? So you directly to the point without any filler words. And why is that important? It's important because email communication, at least from my perspective, should be a productivity enhancing tool and not a productivity destroying tool. And of course, as I said, there are nuances to it. In some cases, you want to perhaps add it and be a little bit more polite or respectful or using that blah, blah, blee, bloop language, I would call it. But in most cases, I just, it's an annoyance. And especially, I'm also doing the investor relations at Swisspreneur, which is a non-profit organization for entrepreneurship in Switzerland. And a lot of investors like very short, concise communication. And back in the day, I also started my emails with, I hope this email fits you well. And at one point I said, really screw that. And I just had a conversation this weekend. We had a team retreat with Swisspreneur. And I talked to him, hey, is that actually fine if I remove so much fluff and the filler words? And he said, yeah, absolutely, you should do that. And again, there are some nuances. In some instances, you don't want to do that. But in most cases, avoid that stuff because it's just a waste of time. And my role model in terms of to-the-point email communications are Americans. Why Americans? When I'm communicating with US folks, which I sometimes do when scheduling an episode for this podcast, many US folks don't start with Dear Nicola or Hi Nicola. They cut to the chase. Like they just write 2-3 sentences, no intro, blah blah. Even they even don't mention your name sometimes, because actually you have their email, so you see from which email address this email is coming from. And they also, the second thing they do, they avoid using best regards. They just end the email with their name or no name at all. So for instance, instead of say best regards Nicola, it's just Nicola. Those are small things, but if you write every single day many emails, it can add up. And those many little 1, 2, 3 seconds you lose, they might add up over a long enough time horizon. And third, US folks, some of them at least, they see email as a productivity enhancing tool, using it for a more efficient life. And I think the US is quite ein Vorreiter in German, which means, let's say, they're really at the forefront when it comes to productivity. There's a interesting professor called Dr. Carl Newport. He has a book called A World Without Emails, and he's talking about productivity conducive way of using email. And I think a lot of people picked up on that and started to implement that. I think still, because I worked in the US for 6 months in a corporate, and still not everybody is aware of productive email communication, but it's more acceptable in the US to use shorter, more concise, more succinct language as opposed to empty filler words or empty long written emails that anyway nobody's actually reading, or most, I would say, because we get so many emails and just want short communication. Makes life so much easier. By the way, a quick side note here, if you are someone who's using a lot of email communication and correspondence, I'm a heavy user of Superhuman, which is a beautiful piece of software made for email communication. And it works, or it operates by using shortcuts. And you get used to it pretty quickly. And the likelihood is way higher that you attain inbox 0 on a regular basis. I have on my main inbox, I think for 56 weeks in a row, I had inbox 0, just because, or part of the reason is I check my emails on a regular basis in some slots, some time blocks, and I use Superhuman. It's costs a little bit, but in my case, it saved me a lot of time. And if it makes me a more productive individual, I consider buying such software pieces. And I would also argue, in terms of productive, efficient email communication, in the context of the USA, I think in startups, it's also, when I have a lot to do with startups, Swiss startups, sometimes with US startups as well, there the communication is always super, super concise. Really, some people even write all words in small letters, no capitalized letters, or it's really simple. And I actually like that. And fair enough, in the corporate setting, yeah, sometimes you have a little bit more, prouder people there with a little bit more pride and bigger egos, but you have that everywhere in the end. And maybe there you need to be a little bit more respectful. Fair enough. I totally get that, but you get the gist here. So let's quickly wrap this part of this episode up with a quote by Professor Carl Newport. He wrote, "Include in your message a protocol which identifies the goal of the thread and outlines an efficient process for accomplishing the goal." I like that quote because it makes clear an email should be there with clear language. What's the action steps? What needs to get done? What's the goal of this? And not empty stuff that leaves you with empty room and you don't know what to do or what are the next steps, or you don't feel really informed by reading the email. And so the takeaway here is, stop writing emails like you're writing a novel. Get to the point, respect people's time, say what you mean. And I'm talking here to myself. Because Paul Graham, I think, said, the more words you use, the less people listen. And this is something I'm still working on pretty hardly, more or less, mainly by talking to you guys on this podcast, but also in my sales role right now at a Swiss B2B SaaS company in sales, just to say the same thing, to convey the same message with fewer and fewer words. And the fewer words you use, the more the likelihood is higher that people listen to you, as opposed to using a lot of blah, blah, blah filler words, that because people listen to you. And if you have 100% of words, let's say you have 1,000 words at your disposal, and one person can convey the point, the message with 100 words, as opposed to another person with 1,000 words, I would make the argument the first person would get a little bit more attention. Not always. It depends. Some people are great storytellers and they will use more words, but getting to the point leaves also a little bit mystery if you are sharing a little bit less than you should, to leave a little bit space for questions, for thinking, if that makes sense. So main lesson so far is make it easy to buy from you in terms of sales. And second, if we go one level deeper, write short emails. Now, the core of that is to have a concise communication, to speak and write concisely. And this is a lesson I'm coming back to it repeatedly, over and over again. And I want to make that here as practical as possible. How can we speak more concise? This is something I remember. Give you a quick story. In high school, I was told at the exams, whenever you don't know what to write, write something. Because sometimes you have maybe this blockage, you don't know, you have a blackout and you stop writing, and obviously if there's nothing written, the teacher can't give you a proper mark because he can't see, like, did you actually prepare for the exam? Do you know anything? But if you write at least something, maybe there is some substance in it. And I did that. Sometimes I wrote really novels and more or less empty novels, because back then I didn't have the same mindset as I have right now, because I was a little bit younger, 15, 16, 17, different mindset. But at least I give it an attempt and I wrote something. But I think the lesson I learned there, to write something regardless, is a little bit flawed. It misguided me. Because if you use too many words, you become less and less precise in your speech. And the less precise you are in your speech, the unstructured sometimes, at least that's how I perceive it, the thoughts are in your mind. But if you start avoiding filler sentences, no substance sentences, avoiding stuff like words like likes, which I just used, likes, or like, actually, basically, that's another one. You can put so much garbage away and your speech becomes more concise and more precise. And one way of attaining that is by slowing down when you're speaking. Trying to do that right now, not always so successfully, because sometimes I'm a little bit in a rush, or I get a little bit emotional about a topic and I get a little bit faster in my speech. But when I slow down, I'm more cautious, I'm more careful about the words I deploy, how I convey a point, a message. And it gives you room to think, then talk. And I started to use that tactic in my sales role right now. As I mentioned before, I'm setting meetings. And to set those meetings, I'm cold calling potential clients, prospects. And I realized the slower I speak, the more trust I generate in my prospect, because he feels not pressured into something. He feels like there's another individual on the other side of the phone. And you have time to think, as opposed to if you're in a rush and just babbling your words out, the likelihood that you will say something stupid is way higher. Thus, speaking a little bit less sometimes, I think, is valuable. And again, talking to myself here, because I'm still in this journey of becoming a better, hopefully, a better and better podcast. And this rule of Dr. Jordan B. Peterson, be precise in your speech, such a valuable lesson. And the benefits are multifaceted. It's people will listen to you. You will have more structured thoughts in your mind. And if you're more structured, you know what to do with your life, what goals to pursue, what actions to take. Now, how do we become more precise in our speech? At least in my case, what helped me is to record those podcasts on a regular basis, once a week. I'm doing that here. Also to write short newsletter issues on my newsletter Zenith Sunday. Short text. And constantly reminding me of I don't want to waste people's time. And still, you're sometimes going to waste people's time because maybe you didn't sleep enough, you don't feel well, whatever, and then you start, wandering, and you don't use the words you actually want, which happened many times in my case and still happens. But yeah, overall it makes life better, I would argue. And so podcasts, newsletter issues, sales, quite frankly, is currently helping me a lot. Maybe public speaking in front of other people. Writing essays, similar to the newsletter thing. And by the way, guys, if you want to start a newsletter, the entry barrier has never been so low. You just go on Substack and start a newsletter, or on kit.com as well. And I have no affiliation with them, just what I would do if I would start over again. It's so frictionless, you just can start immediately. And it gives you a little routine to come up with new ideas over and reflect yourself if you do a similar thing like I do on this podcast or newsletter. All this to say that being precise in your speech, saying more with less words. Now, we talked about making it easy for you, for the prospect to buy, short emails, and concise speech. Let's tackle the last topic of today, which is quite a personal one, approaching women. So I recently shared my podcast. Unfortunately, my relationship ended with a beautiful woman. Very grateful for that time. But now the next step is in my life to find my wife, my life partner, who I want to marry, make children, until we die, we are together. That's where I want to go. And obviously, if I want to find the right woman in my life, I need to put in some effort. Now the question is, how am I attaining that goal of finding the right woman? And I see there are two big options at my fingertips. Option number one is I could go on online dating platforms, which I haven't done before, and I'm still not on any of those platforms, but I considered it, but I still didn't do that. And the other option is cold approaching, in-person approaching. And obviously there are some pros and cons for each option. Let's start with the dating thing. And I'm just sharing with you my thoughts. I've never used a dating platform. I really don't know how it's working. I just listened to some podcasts, so most of you guys probably have more experience in that field than I have. I see the benefit of you have already a curated pool of people on a platform, which is cool. And there are, I think, some viable platforms out there that create a cool pool for you based on your interests, and then you get matched. That's a cool thing. More power to that. If it works. The downside is the social risk involved of approaching someone, like just sending a quick text, is way lower. So it's easier to approach a lot of people. The social risk is lower as opposed to, in comparison to, cold approaching women. So when you see someone who looks, you like her, cold approaching someone, you most likely will deal with rejection. Or it can happen, it can occur that you get rejected. Similar like in sales, like in cold calling, what I'm doing right now. But you get better at it. And I share a quick story here. I've been on a team retreat this weekend. And since this is right now my goal, find the right woman, I approached 2 women over the course of that weekend. And the first woman I approached, I got rejected. And I was a little bit nervous when I talked to her, because that was my first attempt since a very, very, very long time. And then I did it for a second time, and it worked out. I got that phone number of that woman, which is cool. Happy about that. And I just thought about his quote, and shout outs to Sam if you're listening to that. My good friend Sam from Swisspreneur, he mentioned this quote: "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Wayne Gretzky. Very much love that quote, because it makes clear that if you don't do nothing, you will lose. Taking action is always better than to do nothing at all. The first time I heard this quote was back in, I think, 2022, when I recorded a podcast with Cedric Waldburger, which is an entrepreneur and investor, together with, at that point, his business partner, Claude Donce, I think it was his name. And he actually also mentioned that quote. And it stuck with me. And I'm coming back to it, and now I heard it again, and I thought, okay, look, it's a little bit scary. Like in cold calling, it's every morning, or in most mornings, the first cold call you do, just like calling someone you don't know, and maybe this person is rude to you, feels not that good. But then you get going, and you do the second call, the third call, and then you're in a flow state. And the same, at least that's, I think, how it works will work in my case, at least now this week, it worked like this. First time I failed, the second time I already succeeded. So that's a good thing. But if I wouldn't have taken any action, I wouldn't have learned anything. Now I learned, okay, maybe even a little bit how I should talk, how I should approach women. Yeah. So all this to say that, okay, I see those 2 big options. Obviously, there are other options as well. You can join some group, like there are some people making dating groups of singles, and they go for a hike, or they go to an event, do something, and they meet each other. Maybe that's also something to consider. But right now, those are, I think, the options that I will go for. The main option is really cold approaching, because I like in-person conversations, and I believe human beings have sensors, and they can detect very fast if someone is made for them or not. I'm not saying everybody. That's not what I'm saying. Some people are maybe very bad at that. At least in my case, I see it like that. I can pretty quickly sense or feel if someone is a fit or maybe a fit. And how do I come to that conclusion? If I go on a date and I see this woman acting like a dick towards the service people in that restaurant, I may assume she's also rude to other people. Those small actions. But also the way how this person speaks, what stories she tells me, what she's doing in her life, what past experience she's sharing with me. Is she only complaining? Is she gossiping about other people? Because that's an interesting one. If someone is gossiping in front of you, behind someone else's back, it would be super, super stupid to think that this person wouldn't do the same with you. So, to speak behind your back. And it's so obvious if I think about that. Like, there are people out there gossiping all the time, and I think they're just showing how they operate. And if you're a little bit smart, you would understand that the likelihood that this person does the same with you is definitely given. So you can quickly detect if someone is made for you or not. And thus I like in-person conversations. Also asking questions, because as you know, presumably, we communicate not only with our words, but even more with our body language, our hands, our mimic, our eyes, eyebrows, whatever. So if we are just texting, we are learning less and we don't know the other person because the other person can hide behind the screen. But if you get confronted, I think you learn more. And again, tying back to sales, it's the same. Sending emails to get new clients, the social risk involved is way smaller as opposed to cold calling someone. Sending blasting 1,000 emails out, it's not that difficult. But the downside is you learn less, and then on the other side, if you call someone, you can ask them directly question, you get a direct answer. But the risk of someone being rude to you because you're an annoyance and interruption to their day, and they curse at you or they're just not friendly, is higher. So there are some stakes going are associated with that. So yeah, but I think the benefit is bigger. And if in cold calling, for instance, I'm cold calling almost every single day, and the conversion of cold calling, at least now in my experience, is way higher as opposed to emails. And to be frank, we already got that lesson from a sales guy who's already working here, so that was cool. We didn't need to figure out that by ourselves, although in the beginning we sent a little bit emails, but not in a big amount. So that was very helpful. So if you find a running system, go for that. Now, circling back to the dating thing, I think cold approaching someone, whether it's in the street, in the gym, in a restaurant, where, I don't know where, risks are there, but the upsides are huge. So if you're in the same situation, I hope that helps. I will maybe let you guys know. I will think about how much I want to share here of my dating journey. But yeah, for now, that's something I attempt. I also shared a little bit more information about this topic, my structured approach, how I do that in another episode. I think it was called How I Will Find My Wife or something like that. And the gist, quickly to recap that for you, the gist is simply, a lot of people end up with the first best person they meet. But Layla Hormozi found her husband, Alex Hormozi, by putting in a little bit of effort, by creating a list of the most important things that she's looking for in the other person. Then bringing that into a proper hierarchy, a priority list, and then systematically going on dates. Dating, I don't know how many people, many people. Maybe it's 50 people, maybe 100, maybe 30. So you search so long until you find someone. And after each date, you look at that list and think, is that a fit or not? And then you can pretty systematically and pretty quickly move forward, because we're going to spend the most time in our life with our husband or wife. So I think it's worth investing a little bit of effort into that, more than you would in finding a job, because sometimes I feel like people maybe, don't know if I should say that, but invest more time in finding the right job than in finding the right life partner. But life is so much more pleasurable if you have a great person next to you. All right. Thanks for listening, guys. Now, as a thank you for tuning in, I've created a list of the 100 plus most interesting podcast episodes I've ever listened to. You will find episodes on health, wealth, relationships, my top 10 all-time best episodes ever. But just get the list for free by just clicking the link down below. Enjoy. Have a good week. Cheers.